Views. We'll take you to southeastern Arizona, which is home to one of the rarest habitats in our state. Next, it's on to Yuma, one of the most popular places around to hunt dove. But in our first story tonight, we'll take you back to 2002 and the massive wildfire that changed the face of the White Mountains. And we'll take a look at how nature is recovering. Arizona Wildlife Views begins right now. They called it the Monster, a flame-throwing, smoke-belching cyclone that grew into the largest forest fire in the history of the Southwest. The rodeo fire grew so quickly and moved so swiftly over the rough terrain of the White Mountains that firefighters had no hope of stopping it in its early stages. It tore through the forest with such intensity that it consumed about 1 square mile every minute. But the rodeo fire was only half of it. Less than a week after it began, it merged with the Chediski fire, which had been cutting its own swath of destruction through the Canyon Creek area. For those fighting it or living in its path, it appeared to be a match made in hell. By the time it was done, the Rodeo-Chediski fire destroyed 465 homes, it blackened 719 square miles, and forced the evacuation of almost 50,000 people. Miraculously, no one was killed. The fire has been out now for 5 years, and the forest continues to change and evolve in its recovery.
We have seen a lot of changes in 5 years, and some of these things happened awful quickly within a year or two. Probably most importantly was the ground cover. When you open up these canopies, we've seen ground cover of grasses, forbs, and browse, tremendous increases, especially in the browse component that's important for deer. But the grass cover we've seen increase, and it's had benefits to turkeys, deer, elk, and lots of small game.
175,000 acres of that fire was within the national forest, and like most forest fires, this one burned in a mosaic pattern. Depending on the intensity of the fire when it passed through, it left some areas scorched and others barely touched. From a hilltop, even 5 years later, this pattern is easy to see.
Well, there's lots of reasons why these fires behave in different burn intensities as they come across these ponderosa pine habitats. Could be previously logged or thinned areas, could be the time of the day the fires came through these areas. So the fortunate thing for the wildlife is that this was a big burn. 175,000 acres on the forest is a big burn, but there have been a lot of benefits to wildlife. And that mosaicness certainly is a important factor in how it impacts positively or negatively the wildlife.
Once the fire opened up the canopy and allowed sunlight to reach the forest floor, it didn't take long for a wide variety of plants to begin to come back. The opening of the forest has been particularly beneficial to the mule deer population.
We've seen our fawn crops or fawn survival go from pre-fire conditions of maybe 15 to 20, 25 fawns surviving per 100 does. Post-fire, since 2003, we've seen that number double, and we're seeing fawn crops in the mid to high 40s. Almost 50% of the fawns are surviving. The exciting thing is that's happened for about 3 consecutive years now, and we've probably seen our deer population at least triple in numbers out here.
The new plants not only provide food for deer, elk, and turkey, but much needed cover to protect their young. The regrowth has been so swift that it has taken some wildlife managers by surprise.
The changes happened very quickly. Probably the first year after the fire, for an example, we we decided we better close the turkey hunt, the spring turkey season. And that was in 2003. Coming into the spring 2008 season this year, we were going to have 400 turkey permits. We've seen a tremendous increase in turkeys. And that's all fire related because of the increased grass cover and shrub cover that the young turkey poults need to survive. And there's just more food out here for them. And the benefits to elk, in addition to deer and turkey, we've seen increases in the elk calf survival. Pre-fire conditions, we were probably seeing calf survival on elk in the 30s, maybe up to 40. But post-fire conditions, we've had calf survival as high as 62 calves per 100 cows. So 62% of the calves are surviving. That's been kind of good and bad, and it's been good, but the hard part for us is that we really want to control the elk numbers.
The negative aspect to all these elk are their ravenous appetites. The White Mountains had a very healthy elk population before the fire, and now it is growing even faster.
And then what we do is that we put what's called fence stays, or those curly things that are going down like this. You put a little WD-40 on those, and you stick it on that wire, and you turn it, and it goes, and it connects all three of those strands together. Okay, and that kind of reinforces it so that the elk don't try and go through that.
Fisheries biologist Jim Warnicke is leading a group of volunteers who are helping to fence off portions of Canyon Creek to keep elk and cattle from overgrazing the new growth around the creeks.
As you guys leave the area, you'll see some of these bigger fences that are more exclosures to keep those elk out, because Canyon Creek suffered a lot of damage because of after the fire, all the debris and the sediment and so forth that came with the monsoon rains produced a big old flood that tore things down and killed all of our fish. And it was only through our restocking and allowing everything to regrow again for the creek to come back, the watershed, and that's the hills that are surrounding the creek, stuff starts to grow back. And then it holds the soils there. So when it rains, it's just water that goes into the creek.
Since the Rodeo-Chediski fire, the Arizona Game and Fish Department has been involved in repair and restoration work on Canyon and Mule Creeks. All of this work is part of a long-term plan to stabilize the stream channel and improve the habitat for native and sport fish as well as other wildlife.
Like if we put this one here, then we know that and we'll see where those guys put that one since they put the first one in, is that we will face it on the side of the fence, whether it's this side or this side, okay?
McKay Bagley is an Eagle Scout and one of the volunteers giving his time to help with the fencing project.
Once we get this finished, the elk won't really be able to jump the fence and to destroy any of the plants.
The fence only closes off portions of the creek. This way the habitat can be conserved, plus there are still plenty of areas left open where wildlife and livestock can come in for a drink. A monster fire like the one that happened here in 2002 will forever change the landscape that it touched. But taken in the context of the natural order of things, fire is not necessarily a bad thing.
Prior to the fire, if you looked across the landscape here, you would see what I would call a monoculture of ponderosa pine trees, very even age and appearance. No sunlight hitting the forest floor, and probably the biological diversity was probably pretty low. But since the fire, when you see what's happened, as far as we've got lots of openings, we've got green pockets of cover scattered throughout the whole forest. We've got a huge influx of grasses and browse plants. We've got more dead and down logs, trees on the forest. We have more standing dead trees. All of these have increased the biological diversity in here for the wildlife. You know, if you look at it, to a lot of people it doesn't look very pretty, but I think to wildlife managers you look out here and it does look pretty, because This stuff that doesn't look pretty is home or food to so many species of wildlife that we never saw in here before. So we look at the whole thing as being positive and very healthy right now.
Tucked away in the harsh desert environments of the Southwest are lush, vegetated, and diverse aquatic habitats known as cienegas. Early Spanish explorers used the word cienega to describe these muddy and swampy places. Many of Arizona's most unique species of plants and animals thrive in cienega habitats. Sedges, horsetail, and watercress carpet the understory, while riparian trees such as willows, cottonwoods, and walnuts provide much-needed shade. Adjacent flatlands are comprised of dense stands of saccatone, a native bunchgrass that thrives in salty soils, which then gradually transitions into extensive mesquite bosques in the drier uplands. The thick-bodied Gila chub, the diminutive Gila topminnow, and the pugnacious desert pupfish are three of Arizona's native fish species unique to these quiet seeps and spring-fed marshlands. The historical distribution of the Gila chub corresponds almost exactly with the historical distribution of cienegas in southern Arizona. Gila chub are highly secretive and tend to congregate in deep pools with extensive cover such as undercut banks, overhanging vegetation, and woody debris. They are omnivorous, eating a variety of foods including insects, plant material, and even other fishes. In the early 1900s, Gila chubs were sometimes called the red fin chub due to the prominent red and orange coloration displayed by breeding males. Gila topminnows were once widespread and abundant throughout these seeps and cienegas, as well as along margins of streams and rivers of the Gila River Basin. They prefer the warmer and shallower portions of the habitat and feed upon aquatic insect larvae, organic material, and other aquatic vegetation. During the spring and summer breeding season, dominant male topminnows turn black, with yellow to orange fins. Female Gila topminnows are viviparous, meaning that they are fertilized internally and give birth to live, fully formed young. The Gila topminnow is Arizona's only live-bearing native fish. Desert pupfish were also widespread throughout springs, marshes, and backwaters of larger river systems. Similar to topminnows, pupfish occupy shallower habitats and eat a variety of foods. During the breeding season, male pupfish turn an iridescent blue with bright yellow and orange fins. They are extremely aggressive and will actively defend established territories. Pupfish are unique in that they can tolerate waters of high salinity, up to 3 times saltier than seawater, and they can survive temperatures ranging from near freezing to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Historically, these stable cienegas provided secure habitats for fishes and other species of wildlife. The Gila chub, Gila topminnow, and desert pupfish are near extinction. Both the Gila topminnow and the desert pupfish are listed as endangered under the Endangered Species Act, while the Gila chub is currently a candidate for listing. In the early 1880s, during one of the wettest periods in Arizona's history, pioneers and cattlemen began to settle the West. Huge herds of cattle grazed on the abundant vegetation. Overgrazing, coupled with a severe drought in the 1890s, forced cattle to concentrate near the only remaining water sources. The streams and cienegas of the Southwest were hard hit, leaving only a few scattered and isolated locations. Humans began to dam and channelize waterways, which interrupted natural flows. Irrigation of crops and groundwater pumping for domestic use has also led to reduced in-stream flows and drying of rivers and streams and their associated riparian plant communities. Today, cienegas represent one of the rarest of all aquatic habitats in Arizona. State and federal agencies, conservation organizations, and other private stakeholders have taken steps to conserve, enhance, and restore cienega habitats in Arizona. These habitat protection and restoration activities have also paralleled recovery efforts for the establishment and enhancement of many new populations of native fishes.
Lots of fish upstream about 100 yards.
The Nature Conservancy purchased the Canelo Hills Preserve in 1968 to protect O'Donnell cienega as an undisturbed natural wetland. O'Donnell cienega is now home to Gila chub as well as other native species such as longfin dace, Sonora suckers, Chiricahua leopard frogs, Huachuca spring snails, and several species of rare and federally endangered plants. In 1998, the Bureau of Land Management purchased what is now the Las Cienegas National Conservation Area from a mining company with the intent to protect the grassland and aquatic system from development. Cienega Creek, which flows through a portion of the conservation area, is currently the longest segment of stream in Arizona free of competitive and predatory non-native species. The Arizona Game and Fish Department, in cooperation with the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, recently transplanted hundreds of Gila top minnows and longfin dace into a tributary of Cienega Creek during the dedication of the Las Cienegas National Conservation Area. This dedication provided the public with an opportunity to participate in conservation efforts and with on-the-ground recovery of imperiled native fishes.
The idea is not to splash the fish on the ground or drop them on the mud or splash them from high altitude, but lower them in the water and let them out. Ready?
Agency efforts and stakeholder partnerships have helped establish populations of Gila chub, Gila top minnow, and desert pupfish in the rugged and remote Lousy Canyon, located on the Agua Fria National Monument. It is truly a landmark success that all three of these species occur in one pristine and secure habitat. Unfortunately, many of the streams, springs, and wetlands in Arizona have not fared as well. Non-native aquatic species pose serious threats to remaining populations of top minnows, chubs, and other native fishes. The decline of the Gila top minnow has coincided with habitat alterations and the widespread introduction of mosquito fish, a non-native live bearer, used to control mosquitoes in urban and rural settings. Mosquito fish outcompete top minnows for food and space, as well as directly prey upon their young. Additional non-native predators, such as green sunfish, red shiner, bullfrogs, and crayfish, among others, have had devastating impacts to our native fish populations, including both the desert pupfish and the Gila chub. The unauthorized and illegal release of non-native species, including aquatic pets such as turtles, frogs, snakes, and aquarium fishes, can also spread diseases and parasites that can seriously impact the health of our natural aquatic ecosystem. The creation of new habitat is a critical component in native fish management and conservation, and ensures a secure environment free from the perils of non-native species. What value will come from protecting species such as the Gila top minnow, the desert pupfish, or the Gila chub? Why should we care? Value may be attributed to the functional and aesthetic qualities of preserving our native fish heritage. Both top minnow and pupfish are the focus of current medical studies. Top minnows are used in skin cancer research for their unique ability to withstand constant exposure to the sun's ultraviolet rays. Pupfish, being able to withstand extreme temperatures and high levels of salinity, are used to study kidney function and disease. As humans, we have a responsibility to conserve species that have existed for thousands of years before our time, whether we think of them as magnificent creations or fantastic products of evolution. The Gila chub, Gila top minnow, and desert pupfish are as unique as our landscapes. They represent symbols of our heritage no less unique than the bald eagle, the saguaro cactus, or even the Grand Canyon.
That's not thunder you hear in the background. It's September 1st, and we find ourselves outside Yuma, Arizona, on opening day of dove season. As the sun peeks over the horizon, dove leave their roosts and anxiously head toward fields to grab a bite of breakfast. Just as anxiously, hunters are waiting. The federal government sets the season and bag limits for dove.
The federal government sets those limits because it is a migratory game bird, and under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, they are responsible and the stewards for migratory game birds, which the doves fall under.
For some, the most difficult part of the hunt is not hitting a darting bird in midair, but rather finding a place to legally hunt. That Eden, that perfect place.
In dove hunting, you're not out chasing dove. What you're doing is you're finding a location where you're getting between dove and something that's attracted to them, and that's going to be food, water, roosting and nesting habitat, or some combination of those things. Most of the time, hunters are going to catch these birds flying between their roosting and nesting grounds for the night before, out to food and water. And you want to find, once you find those places that are attractive to dove, it's really a matter of getting out, finding out where those flights are going to come from. This morning at the curry hunt, for example, all of our flights were very dense from the east and the west, but we had almost no flight from the north and south. So that's really the trick to this, is to find those things attractive to dove, do a little scouting to determine what those flights look like, and you're probably going to have a good dove hunt. This morning we're out on a piece of property that belongs to Mr. Clint Curry. He's a long-time farming family in Yuma, Arizona. For the last 4 years, Clint has donated a piece of his property for us to have a fundraising hunt for the Southwest Arizona Habitat Partnership Committee. The hours for the first season for adult hunters is from a half hour before sunrise to noon. Junior hunters, 17 and under, can hunt the entire day. The second season, which runs from the 23rd of November through the 6th of January, is a little bit different hunt in that all hunters can hunt all day, which for our purposes is a half hour before sunrise until sunset. During this season, the daily bag limit is a total of 10 birds, 10 mourning and white-winged dove, of which no more than 6 can be white-winged. After the first day, the possession limit is 20 dove.
The types of shotguns seen on a dove hunt are as varied as the hunters themselves, but basically fall into 2 categories.
Some of the common shotguns you'll find are the 12 gauge, 20 gauges. The reasons for those, they kind of show the best patterns of shot. They're most available guns. The ammo is most available at the local stores here, and they seem to do the job. Some of the younger hunters like to use some of the smaller guns, like the 410 shotguns.
As far as the shells go, most dove hunters use low-base shotgun shells. Simply ask for dove and quail loads at your favorite sporting goods store. In addition to their shotgun and appropriate shells, adult dove hunters must carry their license and stamps in the field.
You need a regular hunting license. You also need the migratory game bird stamp, and that is a national stamp, and that is required for hunters 16 years of age or older. The regular hunting license is only required for hunters 14 years of age and older. So under 14, they don't need a license as long as they're with a licensed adult, 18 years or older.
This year, the department is also offering Class M and N licenses.
M&M is one of our new super conservation licenses, and that's one of the exceptions this year. It includes actually the migratory bird stamp.
This is the second year that the Eurasian dove has been legal to hunt. These newcomers make an interesting target for wing shooters.
They're an invasive species. They started out in the Bahamas in the 1950s and 60s, got into Florida in the 1970s, and have been working their way west. They got into Arizona sometime in about the mid-90s. It's a large bird. It's the largest of the 3 legally huntable dove species. It's fairly distinctive in flight in that it is larger. It's pretty much a uniformly cream color. They do have in flight, when you catch the sun right, you can see a light wing patch, but it's not nearly as distinct as a white-winged dove. It's much more like a light gray against a lighter gray. The name comes from a very distinctive black patch they have on the back of their necks.
For more information about anything you've seen on tonight's program, go to our website, azgfd.gov.